Two Wheels this week, something a little different. Richard takes a ride on a 750cc Baby VMAX. And with some advice if you're thinking of taking your bike test. Jeff travels to Italy and gives us a guided tour of the Ducati Museum. But first, I take a ride on a big Suzuki. Well, winter's starting to draw in very fast now. It's getting very cold and damp, especially in the morning. So maybe it's about time to put the superbike away for a couple of months, keep it nice and clean and shiny. Well, if you do that, what's your alternative? You could use a car, of course, but then you'll be stuck in a traffic jam on a motorway all day. Not a lot of fun. You could, of course, use a little scooter. Well, the trouble with little scooters is, well, they're little, aren't they? And if you do use a motorway, you'll struggle to keep up with the rest of the traffic. So we need a big scooter. Well, here is a very big scooter. Suzuki's Bergman, all 400 cc's of it. Well, if you want to split hairs, it's actually only 385 cc's. But it was the first of the new breed of larger capacity scooters, aimed at eliminating the problems of the smaller machines, which can often feel underpowered with their little two-stroke motors. Having ridden the Bergman around for a few days, I've noticed that more people ask the question, what's it really like, than they've ever done when I've turned up on some fancy sports bike. It seems to me that bikers are genuinely intrigued and interested to learn more about this machine. They want to borrow it and try it out. Those that do usually return with a smile on their face and then agree, if somewhat reluctantly, that it's actually rather good. Just about the ultimate rev and go. Well, there's not a great deal to look at mechanically on a Bergman because it's just one huge lump of plastic, and it is huge as well. It's physically quite a big machine. But despite that, the height of the seat is definitely worth a mention. Look at that. Look how low to the ground it is. Now that can be a problem on even the smallest of scooters, little 50cc scooters. Just because they've got a small engine doesn't mean they've got a low seat height. Some of them are actually quite tall. But on this, despite its large capacity and big physical size, no such problem. So short riders, no trouble at all. If I just pop it onto its main stand, we can just have a closer look at the actual brakes on it because they're definitely worth a mention. At the front here, you'll see there's two hoses there going to this caliper for the front disc, and it's disc brakes front and rear on this one. And the reason there's two hoses is because it's got a linked brake system, which means when you pull this left-hand lever on the handlebars here, it brakes the back as normal, but it also brakes the front. So that brakes back and front, and this one over here just brakes the front. Linked brakes, very, very clever. As I say, you can't see anything mechanically on this, but under there is the engine, 400 cc's, single cylinder water-cooled engine, and it actually lies flat, sort of along the chassis really. The cylinder goes that way. If I would take the bodywork off, you'd see what I was talking about, but it goes that way, which means the piston's going up and down along the length of the bike. That helps to keep the weight down, and it also means that you've got more space under your seat because you've not got a cylinder stuck up there, taking all the room up. And under the seat, there's actually quite a bit of room. Opens up that way, supported on this strut here, and as you can see, a full face helmet in there, no problem. It has to go that way. You can't put it that way because it won't shut, but if you put it that way, it'll shut quite easily. Plenty of room in there. Also helping to keep the weight down and keep the weight low, should I say, not so much down but low, is the petrol tank, which is there. Filler cap's there and the petrol tank is beneath there, so again, lots and lots of weight low down. Moving up here, look at this here. This is a brake lock because you've got a problem on a scooter because it's automatic. You can't leave it in gear. So if you park on an incline, it will roll away. Normal motorbike, you just leave it in gear. So this has a brake lock. Pull that down there and it puts a little lock, cable operated, on the back wheel. Stops it rolling away. So quite a good idea. Next to that, a funny, strange little arrangement here for the ignition. Take your key out. You pop that down and it covers the ignition hole there, so you can't put a key in, you can't put a screwdriver in. So to release that, you use the back of the key, which is shaped there to match that little socket there. Give that a flick, that pops up, and there you go. You stick your key back in and you're away. Then onto the dashboard up here. A nice dashboard on this with everything you'll need. Not a lot of warning lights. There's a warning light for the brake lock and there's one for the high beam, and that's it. But you've got a clock, you've got a digital trip there, two different trips on this, analog speedo, fuel gauge, which I always keep saying, every bike should have a fuel gauge and a temperature gauge. And that dashboard at night looks really nice actually. You won't see this now during the day, but at night when you've got your lights on, it's got a lovely kind of icy blue backlight to it. It looks really, really smart, very nice. Up here then, a big screen.
not the biggest of screens I've ever seen, but it does actually do a reasonable job. It keeps the worst of the wind blast off your chest and your neck area, so it's quite useful. And that's quite important because this, remember, might only be a scooter, but it's 400 cc's and it's capable of cruising at 85 miles an hour plus all day long.
And that may sound amazing, but it's true. The top speed is quoted as 97 miles an hour. But I have to say that anything above 80 should really be reserved for only the very straightest of roads, because the Bergman does have a tendency to start weaving around at high speed when things get a little twisty. I think due to a combination of 13-inch wheels and a very long wheelbase. But of course you shouldn't be doing those kind of speeds. That said, it's very difficult to find fault with this machine. Perhaps its big problem lies with its image, or lack of it. It's often seen as rather uncool to ride round on a scooter. But more and more bikers are waking up to the idea that these machines are more than capable of doing the job. I'd say swallow your pride, try one out, you might just like it.
You know, I really do like this Bergman. I don't mind admitting it. And I think it's the only scooter really at the moment that's got any real respect from the bike world, if you like. But it's very comfy. You could sit on this all day long. You can put your feet up there, the old feet forward riding position. You can have your feet down there, big comfy seat. There's even a backrest there for the rider, so you're not going to get a sore back. And even the pillion gets little footboards like that, look at them. None of your little foot pegs on this. And how about that for a pillion seat? That is the height of luxury, if ever I've seen it there. Fantastic seat that. That's bigger than the whole seat on some of the sports bikes that I've been on. I mean, that is superb. And a nice little backrest there for the pillion, so the pillion isn't going to fall off the back. You could notice on this one that it's had a little rack fitted. That's a little aftermarket accessory because, of course, this is a second-hand machine. This is done just over 3,000 miles from new. And if you wanted to buy this one, you could save £1,000 on the new price. This is on offer at just £3,500. A brand new Bergman now on the road will cost you £4,500. And you know, I'd go anywhere on this. I think you could go touring on this dead easily because it's comfortable, it's got the performance, it'll keep up with everything else on the road, well, apart from your top super bikes. It's got the comfort, it's got luggage carrying capacity. You could put a top box on there, and if you were on your own, you could strap loads and loads of stuff on this pillion seat there. Take anything you needed with you. I think my next touring holiday could be on a Suzuki Bergman because really this is all you'll ever need. Unless, of course, you've got a mate like mine who happens to own one of these. Alan, are we ready? Yeah?
Fun size. Now there's something I've never understood. Tell me this, a fun size chocolate bar is not this big. It's 6 feet long and weighs 15 stone. That is fun size. Well, this is the Yamaha FZ750 Phaser, and it's seen by many as the fun size VMAX. Of course, the real VMAX is a 1200cc fire-breathing monster of a bike. In a straight line, it'll out-accelerate anything this side of the space shuttle. Unfortunately, it's about as adept at going around corners as a double wardrobe, so don't. This, though, is the baby version, 750cc in an engine taken directly from the straight FZ750. Pulling away, it feels every inch the mini hot rod. Your hands are quite close together on narrow bars. You sit bolt upright, though your legs are quite tucked up. It doesn't feel big, certainly, and that's because it isn't. But there's quite a pleasant surprise around the corner for you. It is not unmanageable. Actually, despite the show-stopping, rather cruiser drag bike looks, it's not a bad shopping bike. It's really handy around town. Don't tell your mates, though. Ooh. Ooh. Hey, you've got to have chrome if you're going to have a cruiser, and this is a little baby cruiser. Grrr! Look, missus, I'm a bad boy. Enough work was done on that engine over the years to make sure that it'll always be there for you, and it actually packs quite a surprisingly useful mid-range punch. There's certainly power available more or less wherever you are in the rev range, which makes it very handy for town use again.
Look, I know it's not exactly prehistoric, but you have got to bear in mind that this does hark back to an earlier era of biking. It's over a decade old, obviously. So at the front end, yes, we've got twin discs, ooh, but each one has only got a single pot caliper on, so stopping isn't exactly incredible. The long forks are the old-fashioned way up, and then the mirrors. They hark back to an era when the mirrors were really there just to make sure you've got your helmet the right way on and make you feel rather self-conscious as you're riding along. It has got some rather high-tech lights on the tank though. Not that you can see them when you're riding. At the back where we've got twin rear shocks, very much the cruiser look, as is these stunted little pipes that kind of mimic the slash cuts on customised bikes, but do not expect them to make the same kind of noise. Muffled, they certainly are. And the final cruiser touch is the rear wheel with that almost solid look. Now, another thing, at the risk of being stereotypical, sexist and downright insulting, if I was really giving this the hard sell, I would have to say it's one for the ladies. Only because, well, I'm not exactly tall myself, and the seat height on this is nice and low, which makes it pretty manageable, and you don't feel like you're going to topple at the lights, but at the same time, you're not going to be left behind by your mates. It's got plenty of go, so they won't laugh at you on your silly, girly little motorbike. Okay, so forget the whole fun-size VMAX thing. It might look like one, but that's about it. What it's actually got more in common with is today's Phaser, because despite the rather aggressive looks, it's actually a really practical but quite powerful town bike. If you're looking for something for scratching around on, you don't want to have anything with your backside in the air and your head on the floor on a sports bike, but you don't want a boring old commuter bike, and you've got about £2 to spend. And it's well worth a look, because for that money you could get a nearly mint one, and nobody else will have one.
And after the break, we take a look at rider training, and Jeff takes us on a trip round Ducati's museum. Well, what the hell's going on here? Well, many of the letters that we get in our office are asking the same question. How on earth do I get a motorcycle licence these days? It does seem to have become unnecessarily complicated. So I've come down to CSM Motorcycle Training in Manchester to try and find the answer. Well, this is Dave Williams from CSM in Manchester. Dave, answer this question for me. How do people get to ride a bike? How do you get a licence these days?
When they become 16 or 17, they apply for the provisional licence, turn up down here with a rough knowledge of the highway code, the ability to ride a push bike, and then they go through CBT, which you can see being conducted behind you. Right, now this CBT is a legal requirement, compulsory basic training. You have to do this, don't you? If you're riding a bike or moped on the road displaying O plates, yes.
Right. So what's the CBT all about? I mean, I noticed that they're going round now, but they weren't going round before. They were doing an awful lot of talking.
It basically familiarises them with the bike before you actually get them on it. There's no point letting somebody loose onto a bike and explaining, there's your throttle, there's your clutch, off you go, if they can't stop. Yeah. Get them used to the brakes, explain all the controls and how they work, and then they'll set them off, moving around, just moving from point to point, getting them used to moving off and stopping, like you did when you learnt to drive a car. Your first lesson is just the basics, and then depending on how they progressed, depends on what we go from there.
Right. And there was some classroom chat as well earlier this morning. So what are they talking about there?
Oh, they basically come in and check their eyesight. They will check that the people know what they should be riding, i.e. don't ride around in jeans and a pair of shorts, jeans and t-shirts and stuff out on the road. Make sure they've got the helmets on, what they should ideally be wearing, jacket, gloves, check their eyesight, make sure they can see what they're doing, and then out into the car park and start going through the basic machine controls with them.
Right. And then, so once they've gone through all the basic chat, I say there was an awful lot of time spent off the bike, just explaining it, and I noticed they were rocking it, is that presumably for the weight and things like that, is it?
Rocking it is checking the weight, checking the brakes are working. They pushed it round, leaning it to the left, and pushed it round to the right, again just to get them used to the weight. They pushed it across the car park so they could just apply the back brake and feel how that worked, and just pushed them across using the front brake so they can feel how powerful that is, and then push them across using both brakes just to show that yes, if you use both brakes, that is the most effective way. Later on they'll do a braking demonstration on that, showing the differences between the brakes so that it should sink into the students the best way to apply the brakes.
Right. So, and eventually, after all this, they actually start moving and they're going around. What they're doing, they appear to be just going around in circles. There must be a lot more to it than that.
These two gentlemen that are doing it can actually ride. If you get novices, it can take quite a lot of time for them to actually get used to the clutch, getting used to setting off, getting used to stopping, making sure they're using both brakes when they're stopping. Mirrors will be checked to make sure that they know what the blind spot is when it comes to looking over the shoulder, what they're actually looking for, why they're looking over the shoulder. Once that's all done, they'll start going on to gear change, and then they'll progress on through the day.
Right. And does everybody pass this straight off? Is this something that you come here and do you do it in a day? Does everybody do it in a day?
There's no guarantees anybody will pass CBT. What we do say is that if they make a mess of the CBT course, then we carry on training them for as long as it takes until they pass CBT. 3/4 of people get through it first time, but they won't get the certificate unless they're safe on the road.
Right, okay. So, big question, I suppose. How much is this going to cost, the CBT?
CBT for a novice rider is £70 for as many days training for as long as it takes.
Right.
They can use their own bike if they want. If they want to hire a bike, it's £30 per day, including the insurance. So they haven't got any worries if they do drop the bike, they won't get a bill for any damage.
And does that happen very often?
Not really.
No, right. So that's if somebody walked in here, no bike, and said, right, I've got my provisional, I want to do my CBT, 100 quid.
Yep, that's right.
Right. This is CSM instructor Andy Dawes. Andy, they seem to be doing all right. Are they any good, these two?
Yeah, they're fine. They seem to have ridden a bit before.
Right.
I'm quite happy with them, thank you.
You've only got 2 in the class. Is that normal? How many do you normally get?
Can have a maximum of 4.
Right.
Okay, that's a legal maximum.
Right.
But 2's not uncommon.
Right. So they seem to have slowed down considerably. They were whizzing round before. They're going very slow now. What are you trying to teach them at the moment?
This exercise is called slow control. The idea is so they can steer and balance okay, so they can control the bikes in heavy traffic or doing a manoeuvre, say for example a U-turn.
Right. So how close are these two guys now to actually getting out on the open road?
They've got about 3 more exercises to go. They're looking pretty good, so should be able to take them out shortly, I think.
So you're confident they'll be all right?
Yeah, very confident.
Nobody's fell off yet. Do you get many people falling off in here?
Not if I can help it. The odd 1 or 2, but not if I can help it, no. They're doing pretty well. Quite happy with them.
Good. This is one of our victims, volunteers, should I say, Neil Edmonds. Neil, CBT this morning, you've had a pretty extensive session. Was it what you thought it would be?
It was a lot more basic than I actually thought, but I think you do need to do it before you get back on the road, certainly.
So have you learned a lot? Because you've ridden a bike before, haven't you?
Yeah, I've ridden, but it's minimal experience with it. It's just basically in the fields when I was 16-year-old.
So did you find you were a bit rusty this morning?
I was a little rusty to start with, yeah, but you soon get back onto it.
Right. Well, you're all wired up for sound now, and you're going out on the road, so do you think you're going to be able to put all this into practice and master it?
Oh, definitely, yeah, I'll be a dab hand at this, but I'm quite looking forward to it.
And so, with all the car park work complete, our intrepid learners were let loose on the open road. And we'll catch up with them in a few weeks.
Now, museums. Are you into museums? Perhaps not. Well, we're in a museum, and it's the Ducati Museum. And here we are, and this is where it all started. Come with me. Now, Ducati didn't actually start with motorcycles. They started in the field of electronics. Early electronics, but nevertheless, they're there. Down there is a condenser, more commonly known as a capacitor these days, but that was the first product they made way back in 1925, and they made that under license. Here's their own branded product, again a capacitor, made a little bit later, but you can see that distinctive Ducati logo on those. Then another range of electronic components there. We come along then to 1935 and a sophisticated office intercommunication system, the old intercom. And then here is the first electrical razor ever made in Italy in the 1940s. They were the first with electric razors. So that was shavers, and in 1941 they actually developed this cinema projector and a beautiful little 35mm camera down there. I mean, I had no idea Ducati had done all this stuff, but there it is. Looks very much like a Leica, but a beautiful piece of kit and very, very rare. And then over here, in the later 40s, you've got a calculator here. I know it looks a bit clumsy now, but there's a lot of technology in there for those days, a mechanical calculator. But how are you going to say, did they get onto the bikes? Well, this was made during the war because they were sort of an ordnance company making bits and pieces for the Italian forces. But at the end of the war, they had to get Italy mobile. And so what better way than getting them onto little motorbikes? And that's next. So we're now in 1946, and this is their first engine, made under license, little 49cc engine, not push rod valves, pull rods, actually pulls down on the back of the rocker arm there. Very interesting, very unusual, very economic engine. They used to sell it you in a little wooden box, and you bolted it into your bicycle. So that was it, the very first Ducati. Next in 1950 came a racing version, would you believe it, of that, and this is it. Look at that lovely swoopy tank there, little megaphone exhaust. They tuned the engine, different cylinder head, carburettor and all the rest of it. Look at these skinny tyres and look at that front brake, a real beaut. But it looks so small. But then, look at this one, 1956, and you've got a bike that looks like a recognisable racer. Triple overhead cam engine there, one in the centre, two either end. But look at it, an absolute beauty. But look how small it is, far too small for me. Now in 1956, they devised this. This actually took 46 world records. But what is it, you might ask? Well, it's a little 98cc, single overhead cam job, single cylinder motor, revved to 10,000 revs, would you believe, which was a lot in the 50s. But it got its 46 world records on steep banking, and all this aluminium fairing wrapped around the rider, and by golly, had you got to be small to get inside there. Then this one becomes more recognisable to me. For our older viewers, that is. I was even at school when these came out, but I lusted after one of these. 175cc overhead cam, Desmo engine, lovely looking little bike of its time, and a cracking sound to it. Something to upset the neighbours. And then, in 1963, came this, a V4 Ducati, 1257cc. See that distinctive 90-degree V there? And there's a picture of the bike behind. It was made for the Berliner Corporation in America, and the idea was they'd give someone an alternative to a Harley Davidson. And interestingly, it says from the blurb here that they couldn't really find out the power output, because when you open the throttle, it produced so much power, it just tore the spokes out the back wheel. That's what they say, makes a good tale.
And there'll be more from Jeff at the Ducati Museum in the very near future. But next week we turn our attentions to this year's International Bike Show, Birmingham's NEC. Join us for a look at all the latest models.